came out onto the street, I coughed quite a bit for the next 5 minutes or so. So there was indeed smoke there in the tunnel.
So the explosion itself, I mean, did that happen, do you think, then on the train in front of yours?
From what I hear, that must be the case. So I didn't witness that myself, but from the news reporting, it seems like there was an explosion right at Malbeke Station. We were the only metro in between the Arloa station and the Malbeke station.
This is what's so frightening, isn't it? That it's just a matter of minutes, and you could have been on that train, or any of us could have been on that train.
Sure. Yeah.
It's so random.
Yeah.
I mean, you sound very composed, but I think I would be far less composed if I was in your position.
Yeah, I guess it might kind of hit a little bit later when I think through things a little bit more. At the moment that it happened, I was just kind of worried about letting family know that I was safe, getting out, and then trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I'm sitting in my office now, and I've been speaking to the press for the past 30 minutes or an hour. So I haven't really had much of a break yet to sit down and process it, but I'm sure it'll hit a little bit stronger once I do.
And where are you from, Evan, originally?
Originally from the U.S. I've been living in Belgium for the last 15 years.
So you're a long-time resident of the city. How's it changed in the past few months, given all that's gone on with the links to the Paris attacks, the raids that there have been every other week, and now this? I mean, this is a very different place to the Brussels, I imagine, that you knew a few years ago.
Yeah, the only really visible difference is that there are more military posted for security. So for the past months since the Paris attack, there are military guards in some of the main metro stations, military guards outside some government buildings and so on. Interestingly, when I was on my way to catch the metro that I was on, I felt like the military police in the metro station were kind of on edge from the attack at the airport.
And that was Evan Lemos, an American who's lived in Brussels for many years, on a train behind, he thinks, the train where that bomb went off on the metro. With me in the studio, our news correspondent, Will Ross. Will, we don't know who was responsible, but this is very much an ongoing situation, isn't it, in the Belgian capital?
That's right, and there's information coming in all the time. The latest that the Belgian police found a Kalashnikov assault rifle next to one of the dead attackers at Brussels airport. That's one line that's coming out from the Belgian public broadcaster. Another line saying that an intact suicide belt was also found in the airport, and there are some reports that there's about to be a controlled explosion, possibly because of that intact suicide belt being there. There have been other controlled explosions, at least one other, in other parts of the city. There's a lockdown at VUB, which is one of the major universities in Brussels. That's apparently due to a threat, some people are reporting, and again, a suspect package is being looked at there. Belgium's Foreign Minister Didier Reynders, he's saying that they fear the suspects involved in the attacks could still be at large.
Well, for the moment, many thanks. Do stay with us.
WNYC receives support from Brown, Gridadaro, Gauchon, and Prado, a law firm dedicated to providing a full array of services to healthcare professionals, including practice-related business transactions and defense of medical malpractice claims. More at bggplaw.com. Random House, publisher of Dead Wake by Eric Larson, about the last voyage of the Lusitania and the German submarine captain responsible for sinking her, available in paperback now.
You're listening to the BBC on WNYC. If Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, red state Utah could go Democratic for the first time in 52 years. On the next Brian Lehrer Show, hear how the 2016 candidates are distinguishing themselves ahead of today's Utah caucuses. Plus live coverage of President Obama's speech to the Cuban people. It's all coming up this morning after the BBC. Sunny skies this morning, turning partly sunny later, getting up to around 55 degrees. Then tonight turns mostly cloudy with overnight lows in the mid-40s. Right now it's mostly sunny, 37 degrees in New York City at 9:20.
This is James Menendez with News Hour, live from the BBC in London. Well, let's get more on our top story. Those attacks in Brussels. At least 25 people have been killed, many more injured in 3 blasts, 2 at the main airport in the city, and also 1 at the city's metro station. A short time ago, we heard from the BBC's Gavin Lee, who's just outside the airport.
Well, I'm standing as close as you can to the departure area of Brussels Airport. You can hear the constant sirens of the ambulance services, the firefighters as well, and the police. I'm about 400 yards away, and what I've seen for the past 5 hours solid now are streams of people walking out, many in shock, many with blankets to keep warm, shaking as they're walking away. Other buses continue to leave the airport because there were many people who were all over in terms of the arrivals area. There were many more flights coming in, so people wouldn't have necessarily known what was happening. So there's a mass exodus continuing from the airports at the moment. Where they're going, well, we see they follow the noise of the sirens from here. About half a mile further down the road is a sports hall very close to Brussels Airport. People are getting the first information they can there. Just to rewind back to before 8 o'clock, these two explosions, I've been speaking to eyewitnesses to get a more of a sense of exactly what went on. We've seen the footage of the ceiling coming down on the atrium level, of the debris all over, of people lying down in a grave condition. The most powerful testimony for me has come from the baggage wrapper, the man who wraps the cellophane for passengers. He was very close to check-in desk 6. This is where around both explosions are said to have happened. It's basically at the centre of the departures area. It's just before you go through security of gate B, so those long chicaning lines as far as you can get without security. Now, Alphonse Euler said to me, and those around him certainly said they watched him as he was dragging about 13 people one by one out of the airport from the floor. There were 7 people, he said, in a grave condition. He said that there were 5 people he saw die in front of him, that this is very close to the check-in desk. He was trying to drag them out as well. He was in tears, he was shaking. He's been giving evidence and giving testimony to the police as we speak, and those around him have been providing support and comfort to him. But that's one very powerful testimony of somebody who was right at the scene. There's a second group of school children very close by, all from Belgium, about 12 to 13. They were going on a school holiday to Prague. They said they were about to check their bags in. They all of a sudden just heard 2 huge bangs. One of the children said to me he thought it was by the entrance because the glass shattered on the second explosion, and they described people running over each other, the absolute panic. No, of course, given the little time that they had, there was no evacuation policy, no procedure. They ran for their lives, they said. All of them now in the distance, walking towards the sports hall on their phones to their families, telling them how close they had been to these two apparent bombings.
Absolutely terrifying. And what's happening to those people who haven't had to go to hospital but are presumably stranded at the airport?
Well, absolutely everybody who's arriving now at the airport or has been there for a few hours, they're waiting in turn, all of them, to go to this sports hall. It's by the Brussels Airport train station. It's about half a mile from the airport. They get first information because very trivial things when it comes to, on a day like this, people are wondering what happens to their bags, what happens to their pets that they might have put on the flights. One woman said to me her house keys, everything, her passport is still at the airport. So just everyday issues of what they do, and also advice about where they can go, because the other things, a lot of tourists I spoke to who arrived in the city this morning who were saying, where is it safe to go? They heard about the secondary attack in Malbec station, to which we know from the Belgium Transport Authority there have been 15 people killed there, 55 people injured, and the scenes and the images coming through on social media of the footage there is reminiscent of the sort of images we saw after 7/7, people screaming in the underground as well. So I think that is the first port of call. The emergency services are setting up to calm people, to reassure people, and to give them more of a sense of information in the immediate aftermath of this apparent bombing attack.
That was the BBC's Gavin Lee speaking to us just a short time ago from right outside Brussels Airport. Let's get some political reaction to what's happened now. Georges-Louis Bouchet, he's a deputy in the Belgian Parliament for the ruling coalition. He's a member of the Prime Minister's centre-right party, the Reform Movement.
There is no word to say the situation because, they saw a lot of terrorist attack in other countries and in France, just now, our neighborhood. But it's really different when the situation is in your country because you know the place, you know the people, there is friend of you, family, and there is no word, a big shock, really big shock.
There's been no formal link established, and we don't know who was behind these explosions, but in your mind, is this linked, for example, to what happened last week, the arrest of the prime suspect in the Paris attacks, that network?
No, because it's not possible to prepare two attacks in the same day into an airport, into a metro in 2 or 3 days. It takes more time.
But possible that something that had been being planned was brought forward?
Yeah, but you know, for the moment it's important to work and the reality, and it's too early to speak with these possibilities. But for the moment in Belgium, there is some police operation, there is some arrests too, and we have more information in 2 or 3 years, or during the day at least.
Do you have full confidence in the security services that they were on top of the situation beforehand, in terms of doing all they could to try to stop attacks, even if, as we've seen, they can't stop everything?
It's possible to control a lot of things. It's not possible to control everything every time. The only solution is to leave democracy, but it's not a choice for us. So it's important to be more vigilant, but it's not possible to stop living and to stop the democracy.
But indeed, but the reality is there are going to have to be much tougher security measures in Brussels in the future, aren't there?
Yeah, for the moment in Belgium, the security is at the maximum. But, you know, for example, when there is this level of security, it's not possible to organize a concert or organize a sport event. And it's not possible to live like that during 1 year or 2 years. So, for the moment, is the situation. It takes 2, 3, 4 days, perhaps 1 week or 2. But it's not possible to keep this level of security during more time than that. Because if you do that, you stop the democracy, you stop the life of a lot of people.
And is that your message then? I mean, Brussels is a major international city, lots of people passing through. Is it to stay calm, be vigilant?
It's important to stay calm, vigilant too, but it's not useful to call the police for everything. It's important for my country to say that there is no Belgian problem, because there is a lot of Belgian bashing that is not a reality. We work hard, and it's not easy for my country because we are in the center of Europe, and there is a lot of movement between the different countries, but the police make the maximum for the security.
And that was Georges-Louis Bouchet, who's a member of Parliament in Belgium. He's an MP for the Reform Movement, which is part of the governing coalition, the Prime Minister's party, in fact. We're going to have more on this here on the BBC World Service on NewsHour coming up. But do keep across as well, if you've got access to the internet, to our live page, bbc.com/news. Minute-by-minute updates, including this, that the Belgian army is apparently right now carrying out a controlled explosion. We mentioned this, of a suspicious package at Brussels airport. There was another similar controlled explosion also near to that metro station where that bomb exploded a little earlier. You're listening to the BBC.
Distribution of the BBC NewsHour is supported by LegalZoom, offering resources to help ensure the last wishes of individuals are upheld through last wills, living trusts, and powers of attorneys. Legal help is at LegalZoom.com. And by Progressive Insurance, protecting commercial vehicles and offering specialized coverages designed to protect small businesses. More at ProgressiveCommercial.com.
The neighborhoods targeted for development by investors and policymakers today are often the same neighborhoods they neglected for decades. Take East New York.
When everybody gave up on the neighborhood, we didn't, and we made it the better place that everybody wants to invest into now.
There Goes the Neighborhood is a new series from WNYC and The Nation about gentrification in Brooklyn. Tune in today during All Things Considered, or listen anytime at wnyc.org/neighborhood.
WNYC is supported by LV Wood, manufacturers of bespoke wood flooring. Bespoke wood floors are made to order and are all made in the USA. The New York showroom at 24 West 20th Street is open to the public. More at lvwood.com.
You're listening to the BBC on WNYC. Good morning, I'm Satirius Johnson. Belgian officials say the toll from 3 explosions in the capital, Brussels, this morning is 26 dead and at least 136 people wounded. The country's health minister says 11 of the dead and 81 of the wounded are from twin explosions at the international airport. The third blast hit a city metro station. At least one of the attacks is believed to have been caused by a suicide bomber. More than 200 flights to Brussels have been diverted or canceled. Meanwhile, the NYPD is ramping up security after the attacks in Brussels. As a precaution, officials say they're adding patrols at key locations across the city and increasing the security presence in the subway. The Port Authority is stepping up security at JFK, LaGuardia, and the Newark airports, and also adding high-visibility anti-terrorist patrols to the PATH system and at the World Trade Center. President Obama has been briefed on today's attacks in Brussels. The White House says U.S. officials are in contact with Belgian officials. The president is traveling in Cuba. Obama is expected to meet with Cuban dissidents critical of President Raul Castro's government. Before that, though, Obama will address the Cuban people, and you can hear live coverage of President Obama's speech this morning on the Brian Lehrer Show right after the BBC. Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton will try to pad their delegate leads over their underdog rivals today in contests for both parties in Arizona and Utah. Democrats in Idaho also will be holding presidential caucuses, but the two frontrunners still face challenges today. Preference polls show that Republican Ted Cruz has a chance to claim more than 50% of the caucus vote in Utah. Democrat Bernie Sanders has targeted today's races as the start of a comeback tour. And the Hudson River tugboat that hit a construction barge earlier this month at the Tappan Zee Bridge construction site will be pulled from the river bottom on Thursday. Coast Guard officials say the tug is currently about 40 feet down. The accident killed 3 crew members, with the body of one of the men believed to still be inside the tug. So it'll be sunny this morning, then partly sunny later, getting up to a fairly mild 55 degrees. Then tonight, mostly cloudy skies with overnight lows in the mid-40s. Tomorrow, truly mild with highs reaching the upper 60s, and it'll be partly sunny. Right now, it's mostly sunny, 37 degrees in Central Park, 40 in Newark at 9:33.
Coming up in just a few minutes, analysis of those attacks in Brussels. We're going to be hearing from our security correspondent Gordon Carrera. First, though, a brief look at one of the big business stories today, and it concerns the oil price. It's still down about 65% from its peak in the middle of 2014, and it's the knock-on effects on global bond markets that are worrying people. Investors have suffered losses, apparently, of at least $150 billion on energy bonds. Not only that, but a number of leading US and European banks are hugely exposed. They've lent heavily to the oil and gas sector. So how significant are these losses? Laura Noonan is from the Financial Times, which has been reporting on this today.
I mean, the losses are obviously very large. You've got to take them in the context of people who have large investment portfolios. And if you think about the losses as well, a lot of them are because of the fall of the value in the bonds and not because of bonds actually being defaulted on.
But the value in those bonds is going down because the oil price is so low.
Yeah, the value in those bonds has obviously fallen because of the oil price. In terms of the oil price, we saw oil as low as $28 earlier this year. It's now recovered to around 40, so that's still a very low level if you compare it to the levels that we were used to in previous years, where it would have been normal to have oil at $100 a barrel. But we have seen a recovery so far. There are mixed signals in terms of whether we expect the recovery to last and whether the recovery is going to be enough to basically stop some of these further oil bonds going into default later this year.
And so how exposed are some banks, and are some banks more exposed than others?
If you look at the European banks, the French and the Benelux banks appear to be the most exposed. There's also some US banks, particularly in the mid-sized lenders, who have large exposures there. The exposures can look very large, but the banks have been doing all they can to really insist that while the numbers are massive, the amounts are actually manageable. So when we had the fourth quarter earnings this year, we had banks telling us that even though they had very high exposures in dollar terms, a lot of this would have been investment grade, or a lot of it, even though it's energy lending, it isn't actually directly linked to the oil price. Now, those are reassuring, but only to a point. I mean, investment grade bonds are always investment grade until they aren't. So just because someone is at this exposure is investment grade now doesn't mean it's going to remain investment grade. In terms of the loans which are directly linked to the oil price, the one thing banks haven't been that transparent about is the amount which they have already set aside to deal with any losses.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to ask, because when I see things like, 40% of some banks' equity invested in these bonds, that's quite scary. So, I mean, are they taking this seriously and making sure that they can actually afford it if the worst happens?
Yeah, I'd be quite cautious about that. I mean, we haven't said 40% of the bank's equity invested in those bonds, and if that were the case, it would be indeed completely alarming and probably illegal. What it is that banks have exposure to energy, which is equal to 40% of their equity. So that is all kinds of exposure, but it is certainly not a direct investment in energy.
And that was Laura Noonan of the Financial Times who carried out that analysis of just how exposed some investors are to oil prices and the energy market. You're listening to the BBC. This is the BBC World Service. You're listening to NewsHour with James Menendez. More now on our main story. Those multiple bomb attacks on the Belgian capital, Brussels, the main airport and a metro station were targeted. At least one is thought to have been a suicide bomb, and at least 26 people have been killed and many, many more injured. A little earlier on the programme, we spoke to two eyewitnesses at both scenes. First, David Crunel. He was at the airport when those explosions there struck.
When I was dropping off my luggage, two explosions happened right next to me, 2 or 3 seconds between the two explosions. They happened in the departure for international flights. I think it was at the American Airlines terminal. My ears are a bit damaged because of the sound of the explosions. I've seen many people injured around me, and including children really injured and covered in blood, people outside on the floor. So no, I'm really lucky.
Well, soon after there was an explosion at a metro station, as I mentioned, Maalbeek. Evan Lemos, he was travelling on a train towards that station when the explosion happened in front of him.
So I was on the metro on my way to work, and I had just changed metros at the Arlois station. The metro had just left. It was on its way towards Maalbeek. We felt a small blast of air. It wasn't a huge blast, but it was something very similar to what you would feel if you were standing in front of a fan. And the metro then immediately stopped. The lights cut out, the engine cut out, and a message came on the sound system saying that there was a disturbance on the line. That went on for 2 or 3 minutes, and then someone came from the front of the metro to the back, opened the very last door. I was there in the back, the last car on the metro. They opened the door, installed a ladder, and had us evacuate down onto the tracks.
Evan Lemos. Well, today's attacks come days after one of the key suspects in November's atrocities in Paris was arrested in Brussels, and one of the issues has been about intelligence sharing amongst European countries since then. A little earlier I spoke to our security correspondent Gordon Carrera, and I asked him, do we know anything about who was responsible for today's attacks?
No, we don't yet, and I think that will be the most urgent question for the authorities, to firstly establish how many people were involved. We understand that the individual at the airport might have been a suicide bomber, but less clear with the subway station, the train station, because obviously they'll want to know whether that threat remains and whether there are other individuals who could be out there planning to carry out similar attacks. So we don't yet know that, nor do we know for sure about any connection to the events on Friday when Salah Abdeslam was arrested, and I think that will be another major focus of the investigation in these initial stages.
Yes, we were speaking to a Member of Parliament from the Prime Minister's party and the ruling coalition. He suggested that these attacks take a long time to plan, and therefore they couldn't have been an immediate reaction to that arrest, although I conceded that perhaps they were brought forward.
I think that's right, in that no one would go from not planning anything to being able to carry something out in 4 days and to get hold of weapons, explosives, put them together. I think it is possible, though, that you had a cell which perhaps realised that the authorities might be onto them following the events on Friday, might have feared that Salah Abdeslam was talking, and therefore decided to speed up a plan or to carry it out at this moment before they potentially got caught. That's a possibility, but we don't know that for sure yet. That's one possibility, and so that there is a link, if you like, to an existing cell, and that's kind of support cell around Salah Abdeslam, because we do know that the network involved in Paris was much larger than thought, and there were others involved who are still at large.
Just on that, two main suspects, is that right?
That's right. There were two suspects, one of whom was very closely linked with Salah Abdeslam and was seen with him. Another one who was at one of the same locations at him, who was still being sought by the authorities. So it is, of course, possible they were involved. We don't know yet, and so it's possible it could be a completely separate cell, which in some ways would be even more disturbing for the authorities if you had another network or cell which was operating in Brussels. So I think that will be a key focus of the investigation.
The other thing that the MP said was that, this wasn't a time, certainly, but there was no reason for people to bash Belgium, as he called it, saying that Belgium was now the epicenter of radical jihadism, violent radical jihadism in Europe. I mean, is he right, or are others right, who are saying, look, this is where it's all happening?
Well, I think, in a sense, saying it's the epicenter makes clear the scale of the problem the Belgian authorities have got. And they've got two problems. One is that they've got a very high proportion of the population, relatively high per capita, who've gone out to Iraq and Syria compared to other countries. I mean, you're still not talking about many, but it's higher than in other countries per capita. Plus, you have what are seen as weaker security and intelligence services compared to some other countries, weaker coordination. You've got the fact that there's a long history of guns in Belgium and an easier accessibility of getting hold of weapons. Plus, you've got districts like Molenbeek, which have a reputation for being hotbeds, if you like, and you can see those questions from the fact Salah Abdeslam was potentially hiding there for 4 months, it's thought, quite close to where he grew up. Don't know that for sure, but if that's true, I mean, that's remarkable in the heart of Brussels. So you look at that and you say Brussels, Belgium certainly have a problem. I mean, it's also true that simply bashing them is not necessarily going to solve that problem.
Just briefly on the coordination thing, what is the problem with the coordination between the police and the security forces? I mean, why is that so complicated?
It's often a question of information sharing between different forces, and you get into situations in some countries where police and intelligence agencies, for historic, for legal, for cultural reasons, don't necessarily share information with each other, and often learn things from other places and don't necessarily talk to each other, and that's been perceived as one of the weaknesses in Belgium.
That was the BBC security correspondent Gordon Carrera. Let's move away from Brussels for the moment. There's been so much attention on Russia's involvement in Syria recently that we've hardly heard anything from eastern Ukraine. Recent peace talks between Moscow and Kiev have stalled. Relations between the two countries, well, they're getting worse, not better. Added to which, fighting between pro-Russia rebels and Ukrainian troops has flared up again. The BBC's Tom Burridge has been to eastern Ukraine. Those rebels are in charge there. He's been to see what life is like after nearly 2 years of conflict.
We're standing alongside a huge queue of traffic which stretches right into the distance. Beyond it, what is now a de facto border which goes into government-controlled Ukraine. In the other direction down this road, rebel-held territory. The main market here in Donetsk is bustling. It's not quite what you'd imagine in this largely unrecognized republic. The money exchanging hands here now are rubles. My heart has always leant towards Russia, 62-year-old Valentina tells us. Despite the hardships of life now, she believes in a brighter future. But 25-year-old Yelena represents a huge number of young people who have left Donetsk. She has returned only to see family and her empty flat. She now works in Kiev.
There is no future here. This territory is in lockdown. You are not a free person. You are a hostage to the situation. I don't see any prospects. It's easier for me to abandon my home and look for a future elsewhere.
Мне проще оставить здесь свое жилье и ехать искать свое будущее где-то в других местах.
market is atypical of this city, where along the main high street, shop after shop is boarded up. Donetsk is a shadow of its former self, a city in a perpetual state of war. The daily exchanges at specific points along the front line have a routine-like feel. And just a few hundred meters away from the fighting, adults still work and children still learn. I'm often surprised by little things here in rebel-controlled eastern Ukraine. For example, at this school, the teachers are talking Ukrainian to the pupils. There are drawings on the wall celebrating famous Ukrainian poets. All the while, the enemy of the authorities that run this territory is Ukraine. The teachers here avoid talking politics.
If it's just